Well, we are the disciples of the good word, but you are the main shepherd. So we are here to talk about. Yes, that is appropriate right now. Yeah.
Let me repent and then.
I think we should start off by the most important question. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Is Taylor Swift at the top of your playlist?
Yeah, she's right up at the top. Yeah, you bet.
Tell us about your playlist. We want to know that.
She's definitely on it. A lot of variety, I guess, really. I've got some, I have some stuff that should be under some kind of parental control. Like it's pretty gnarly. It's pretty inappropriate.
Like what are we talking about? 50 Cent? Are we talking about Nine Inch Nails? Like what are you 90s or are you current?
Corn?
It's more current stuff. Not so. I guess I've got a playlist of old stuff that's titled "Where It All Started." So I've got all the stuff from my childhood.
Yeah,
I like it.
But no, it's like it came. I had my playlist going the other day when I picked up Shelly and Tom from the airport, and Tom's girlfriend was there too. Met up with us at the airport. She was going to drive back to St. George with Tom, and the song came on by Gail, ABCDEFU, that song. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
And I said, hey, as it started, I said, hey, I want to just stop right here and say, I'm sorry if this is offensive. Would anybody like me to turn this off? I just love this song. I don't know why exactly, but I love just the message of it.
And I'm sure Tom was saying, Dad, this is not appropriate and you're going to need to turn it off.
No, nobody complained. Yeah.
For our listeners, Tom is John's son and great kid. And no, that's cool.
Yeah. So I've got a wide variety of stuff on my playlist.
When you say where it all began, what would it be? What would be at the top of that list? I'm just guessing in my head. Is it like Def Leppard?
Yeah, there's definitely some Def Leppard on there. Phil Collins was that's part of it.
Something in the Air Tonight?
Yeah.
It seems like that was like Michelob Ultra or something.
Yeah, that's on there. There's some White Fang on there.
Wow.
There's some Wingers, yeah, but when I think, also some like, there's, I don't even know the gal's name, but Betty Davis Eyes and REO Speedwagon, like from the late 70s.
Yeah.
Your spectrum is broad.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well said. Not old, broad.
Yeah, there's some old,
That was very politically correct.
For sure.
Nailed it. Good job. That's on my list too, because I was the youngest of 5 kids. And so I was really raised as an 80s kid, but my oldest siblings were rocking.
Yeah.
Betty Davis Eyes still. It's just, it's a goodie.
Back from KJQ on the radio. Yeah.
Was that it for you?
Yeah.
KJQ, not K-Bear.
Then it moved to, K-Bear came in high school.
Yeah.
But cassettes, then we got cassettes, some Van Halen. That was
Jump is up there. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That was when we played and played and played and played. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, take us back, if you don't mind. Speaking of in the beginning, we're intrigued to know a little bit about childhood, growing up years, any sage words of wisdom that you now can think of as you think of childhood and family, and what shapes, the upbringing to lead you today where you're now basically founding and running the largest private mental health company in the state of Utah.
Well, definitely I'll start off with saying the older I get, the more gratitude I feel for my past, for my upbringing, certainly appreciation for my parents who loved me and have continued to love me, to support me, siblings that are very loving and supportive. Got a great family. I'm the middle child. Technically the middle child. I've got a twin brother, identical twin brother, that came 6 minutes later and dead, by the way. That's kind of an interesting story. Apparently
Wow.
I killed him. We joke about that I wrapped the umbilical cord around his neck. And then when he gets a little out of place with me or starts getting a little cocky, I'll say, "Do you remember you were dead?" Right? Like,
I've done it once.
there's been some damaged brain cells, you know.
Yeah.
And no, actually, in reality, even with the damaged brain cells and even with the 6-minute jump start on him, that's huge at that age, right? At that point in development. But he's leaps and bounds ahead of me. That guy's awesome.
Yeah. As a sidebar, just for listeners.
Yeah.
So if possible, someone who is leading, the state's largest private mental health company, twin brother runs one of the best bike shops in Utah. The bike shop in Ogden, which, Preston and I love. Anyway, cool. That's cool. Just to kind of put those together. Brainstoke has such a, the roots are in outdoors and biking and, all things, Nike, Utah. So it's cool. It's cool to kind of connect those dots together.
Yeah.
By the way, for our listeners, you may see in the backdrop, the Aspire logos. We've said this all along, but Aspire Network, which consists of Aspire Counseling, Aspire Medical, and Aspire Billing, are the main sponsors of Brainstoke. So, yeah. Thanks, John.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. So continue. Keep going.
Yeah, so going back to that, I definitely, my gratitude and sensitivity and awareness has increased with life experience. And I'm super grateful for all that my family has done for me, but also for the challenges, the trauma in the background, which I know that sounds like the makings of a serial killer kind of story here, or it can be really dramatic. And that's one thing I've learned over the years, especially in this field, is that one person's trauma is not somebody else's. It's very unique and personalized, and it's dangerous when we get into judging the intensity of trauma, but not to sound dark and scary about my past, because I would say I had a wonderful upbringing, but there were challenging things, challenging experiences, but it's made me a better person. It's made me more sensitive to people's loss and people's suffering, and so I'm super grateful for my past, grateful for my upbringing.
That's cool. Thanks you for sharing that. Do you mind if we double click a little bit?
Sure.
And go into that?
Yeah.
So when you describe trauma the way that you described it, because many of our listeners have loved the other therapists, Carson, Liza, in fact, some of our most listened to episodes that we've done have come from those two, and people's comments are, we listened in because of Brainstoke or whatever, but we were gaining tools that we did not have. And so when you talk about trauma, talk about that from a clinical perspective. I mean, you have a unique lens where the rest of it are just like, I don't know, childhood sucked. I had a lot of disappointment or whatever, but that from your point of view, that is part of a recognition and a process, a therapeutic process.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for a lot of years, many of us in the helping professions, the medical profession, mental health specifically, have done trauma victims, people that have experienced trauma that are currently suffering from trauma. PTSD is a great case in point. We've done them a huge disservice over the years, because one of the first things that they hear when they come into their doctor or their therapist or whoever they're seeking services from that way, and say, hey, I'm suffering. I'm having these reoccurring nightmares, these flashbacks, we, out of love, out of concern, out of caring, want to immediately take care of that. And for a lot of years, we would immediately start medicating, or we'd immediately start trying to get rid of that, and didn't have the respect and insight at the time of that this is actually a helpful process to re-experience some of that. It's not a fun process, and certainly can cause other kinds of problems, especially when you can't sleep and you go days and days without sleep. Well, then that really starts to jack you up all over the place in a lot of different challenging ways. But the fact that the brain is reintroducing the trauma, whether that's through direct, literal nightmares of the event or events, or whether it's symbolism of that, your brain's trying to do its own systematic desensitization process. And we actually started disrupting that a lot and not allowing for that. So it's not always the sought after response from a helping professional to hear that that's good, that's helping, that's what your brain should be doing. But to have that respect and that concern and help support them through that process, and at times even help them experience that. That's what systematic desensitization is all about, is being with them and helping them to face those issues, to face that trauma, and to be there for them and help them realize they're going to be okay. They're now experiencing something new. It's the same feelings, the same pain, the same emotions that they felt last year or 20 years ago or 50 years ago, depending on when that happened, and that they're not in that same place. Literally, they're in my office on my couch, or they've grown a lot. They're no longer that 6-year-old that can't fight off the perpetrator. They can stand up, they can protect, they can speak out, they can do things to help themselves heal. It's a very sacred and very powerful opportunity, and I've been super grateful to be able to sit with people through that over the past 25 years.
When you go ahead.
No, well, sorry.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you're really grateful for the trauma you've experienced.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. And how do other people embrace the trauma that they're experiencing and dealing with? Like, is that something you try to teach or guide people to, or how did you come to that for yourself?
Yeah, it's certainly a unique journey for each person. And it's something that I try to be very sensitive about, because how I got to that point and accepted that isn't the same for anybody else. And sometimes we can be offensive in trying to help them accept that, and can even be re-victimizing of those that have gone through trauma, when we are trying to, out of goodwill and desire to help, push them forward with that. So it's got to be on their timetable. But introducing them to that concept of how re-experiencing can help with the desensitization process, seeing some of those pains and hardships and suffering as opportunities for growth, as opportunities to increase with our own self-compassion and compassion for others. That's not always an easy sell, right? I mean, sometimes people are like, you're crazy, and it's like, hey, yeah, I'm backing off. I'm with you to go through this when you want, or I'm with you to love you and be there for you even if you don't want to, right? That's entirely your choice. I'm not going to try to force that on you. I'm not going to try to push that. I'm going to share that with you. I'm going to share with you my perspective on what can help. And even when I say I'm grateful for my own past suffering or trauma, there's moments, of course, where I don't feel that way. It's one thing sitting here on a nice, beautiful morning, and I've got a full stomach of food and everything's great, had a good night's sleep, and anyway, it's easy to say it then, but it's hard to say it when I'm in the moment of stress and those memories or that past is being triggered, and it's hijacking my brain and making me behave or respond in ways that I know better. I don't want to. It's upsetting. It's the older you get, the more upsetting it can be, because you're like, I should be past this by now, or I should know better. Why can't I control that? And So there's context there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not always straight across the board. Sometimes it's like, why did this happen? Why do I have to go through that? And certainly appreciate that, and other people that are still in that spot, in that place.
I have a lot of questions for you about just that process. But when you think about your own journey, what was it in your growing up or your development where you said, I want to spend my time sitting with people who are in pain or who are struggling, at some point in your, your journey of becoming, a man, a father, a husband, where you said, I want to do this for a living. I want to sit with people and help them face these things. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm not entirely sure. I've got some markers, I guess, and certainly as I've gotten older and look back, I think that my twin brother Matt had a huge role in that development. My experience as an identical twin has been amazing. I mean, I shared some really tight space with him for 8 months. We were preemies a month early. My poor mom, we were 7 pounds each a month early. So it's good that we came a month early. That would have been rough as she was about to burst. But having such a close friend that understood me so well, we've never been allowed, ever since we were like 6 years old, we have to be separated at family game night, can't be on the same team. Like for old school Pictionary, I'd just put the marker up on the paper, draw a line, and he'd be like, elephant. And they'd be like, yep. And how did you get elephant out of a line? It's like we're just on that same wavelength. Speaking
so
of,
that's real.
Yeah. That's real. Speaking of music back then and Phil Collins, yeah, I can feel it calling in the air tonight, right? and I'd be upstairs, he'd be downstairs, and we'd come meet on the stairs, and we'd be right at the same line in the same song, singing it. And yeah,
that's classic.
But having somebody that's so close and understands you so well, where you feel safe, you feel seen, you feel understood. That's huge. And I think that was a huge part of developing a sensitivity for people's pain and wanting to help them, wanting to let them experience what I experienced that way. Having somebody that really understands you, isn't judging you, isn't pushing you, loves you. I shouldn't say not pushing you. We were fairly competitive growing up. Yeah. There's nothing like for sports. There's nothing better than to have an identical you that's playing one-on-one. We'd play basketball till 2 a.m. till my mom came out and said, go to bed. Get your butts in here and go to bed. Because neither one could pull ahead by 2 points, right? We were that closely matched and knew each other's next move. And it's great. It's a great training program.
I've never thought about it this way.
Yeah.
The development of your human directly correlated to your almost yourself, your twin.
Yeah. Wow. For sure. Then there was just a lot of life experiences. I've always been the guy, the kid that friends turn to for support or for talking. Or I served an LDS mission in Ecuador from 91 to 93, had 28 companions. It's typical to have 8 to 12 maybe, and I had 28. I was the mission president, said I was the coach. I was the guy that he'd send, hook up with people that, elders that he was going to send home. And, I was that person. But it's even at that point, I had no thoughts of therapy. I'd never really I don't even know if I knew what a therapist was at that point.
But at the time, what was the gift that he was recognizing that you clearly had?
I think patience. Could see the good in people, could bring that out. A lot of amazing experiences with those that are suffering and struggling, and helping them to feel seen and heard and loved. It's amazing what people will do when they feel that way. If they feel good about themselves, they change behavior pretty quickly. I think more rapidly than trying to get them to change behavior, So...
So you came home from your mission, and When to college? When did you settle in on the direction you were going to go?
Great question. I was thinking of that as one of those markers because my first quarter, it was quarters back then at Weber State, went right back to Weber State. And that first quarter back, I took a human development course. And it was kind of two things. One, it was taught by a professor that just loved what he did, right? It doesn't seem to matter what subject it is. If they love what they do, it's contagious and it makes for a very positive experience. But it was also just the human mind and the human experience. Like I immediately fell in love with it. I was like, this is me. This is what I like. I love people. I love humans. I love understanding what makes them tick. And yeah, that at that point, that was where I knew I wanted to go in that direction. It might have been that very quarter, during that time that I started reaching out and talking to people about, what fits this field, and that's became aware of therapy, and specifically marriage and family therapy. I had a desire to work with couples particularly, and as I looked at the social work programs and the psychology programs at the time, I thought I'd like more of that couples training specifically, so I decided the marriage and family therapy route.
Were you married at the time? Were you and Shelley married? Or
Yes.
okay, did that play into it? Just
probably should
hey, I have a perfect marriage, and I probably should be counseling others to do the same.
More like, if you're going to marry me, you better get your crap together. Like that coming from Shelley, to be clear, not me saying that to her. Right? No, we got married quickly. 6 months later, we were married.
And Shelley's a successful businesswoman, architect. She teaches at, University of Utah. So pretty dynamic couple in terms of capability. It's remarkable. Mention a little bit about, Shelley, if you would, and then, your kids, a little more about family, and then we'll dive into, some other topics.
So gosh, I don't know where to start with that. I love my family. I love my children. We're really close. We've had I think a fairly typical family life experience growing up. Nearly killed each other many times. I think I've heard you say almost going to prison, or maybe could do something to get you there, and struggles and hardships, but a lot of love and respect for each other all along the way. I think one of the things that was super helpful for me early on, and it probably had everything to do with being in the field as a young father, was learning to let go of control, that battle for control. When I talk with clients that are coming in, especially that are wanting to address parenting kinds of issues, I oftentimes will say, hey, there's two ages or phases of development where people are so intensely committed and protective of their agency, and it's 2 to 3 year olds and adolescents. They're like the fiercest fighters for that agency, for personal agency. And I think there was a lot of moments, especially when my girls, they went from perfect princesses to hitting hormones age 14, 15, and completely going off the rails, and learning very quickly in that process that if I'm going to try to make them safe and healthy and okay, that wasn't going to go anywhere, that I needed to let go of that. It's not a matter of not being there and not trying, and it's certainly not a matter of setting some boundaries and having expectations, but going head to head and battling it out for control is never effective, never helpful. Yeah. And so letting go of that and respecting their ability to choose for themselves. Again, there's those deal breaker things. That's where you hear it all the time. Choose your battles. Well, right, you're going to lay down the law with certain things, especially when it comes to potentially illegal activity or potentially losing their life. But I think that's hard to do. It's hard to let your children fail. It's hard to let them mess up, and especially when there's some pretty serious risk of health and happiness, and we get worried about their futures and messing up their futures, and actually to let them mess up their futures pretty early on can be helpful in learning some huge life lessons, and then correcting and learning from those things.
Seeing I've interacted now with you and your family for a couple of years at some of our company parties and picnics, and in the office, out of the office. And when you described allowing your kids agency, I've seen that in real life. I think that a lot of people will say that, like, oh, I'll allow my kids to, make their own choices and have their own failures and learn from their mistakes. But in reality, the guardrails for most families can get pretty narrow. Right. Well, these are your choices within these limits,
right.
And it's been cool for me to kind of witness that. And, one of the markers that I often recognize, even in our own children, who we have 2 adult children, it's interesting that maybe the marker that I'm weighing now in my own head at this stage of our life is, do they want to spend time with us? Right. And I know you just were in Europe with your kids, and I know a few months ago you guys went to Mexico, and whether or not, I don't know if you and Shelly are paying for those trips, but it seems like your kids want to be with you, and they are safe and comfortable being themselves with you. So let's dive into that, because I think that a lot of our listeners who may be parents, they're in this battle. They're in this battle over will, of how much agency and choice do we allow, and yet still trying to keep them safe, So, I mean, you meet with couples and families and teens all the time. So what are you seeing that's going on around us? And speak from it, maybe from the adolescent perspective, and then maybe the parents.
Man, Tom, that's a lot. I don't know if I can grasp all of that. I'm still sitting here grappling with the thought of, wait a minute, do our children hang out with us because I pay for it? That's I had
obvious.
never
Who wouldn't,
considered
right?
that.
But do they enjoy it when they're with you? Right? Anybody can pay for it, but
sure.
But is there quality interaction while you're there together? Or is it just still like, well, they're paying, so I'm here?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like a real Jackie in how I'm going to respond to this, I think I might just be puffed up here and in denial, but I think we're best friends. We love spending time together. It's huge. And I think a lot of it does come from the respect that each person in the family feels from each other. That there's love, there's acceptance, it's not just a passivity. We all have our feelings and our values, and we share a lot of values, but there's just a lot of respect for each person as an individual. But yeah, that was a great question. I thought, wait a minute, yeah, maybe there would be fewer.
Did I make you feel insecure about the dollars you're throwing at them?
No,
I'm just kidding. When you say that, though, when you say we are best friends, because I've spent enough time with you, and because you've literally spent 25 plus years meeting with people, people, you can read people. And so when you say we're best friends, with our children, of all people who could read that correctly and know it's genuine, it would be you. And so I think that's cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I think there's a part of me that feels a duty to consider that point and be like, wait a minute, I need to reevaluate this and need to have a heart-to-heart with each of them. How much of paying for this trip or this experience plays into your decision making?
How many kids do you have, John?
3, 2 daughters and a son.
And how different are all 3 of them?
Crazy different.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy different. Yeah.
how
very unique.
so because of that,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you handle them? I assume each scenario you have with them, you've got to now react and be different, just depending on which child asks that question or does that.
Right.
So I guess my question is, how do you maybe help some of us other parents that have multiple kids that are trying to help not show favoritism, because that's how the kid sees it, that you think someone's a favorite and they're not. You're just treating them different because of the way they are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting because it's something that I think each member of our own family understands. And it's probably because it's something that I've always talked about openly, about saying things like, oh yeah, there's definitely favorites. What do you mean? There's no way around that. The whole idea of you can't be biased, and even in my profession, it's like that's one of my first disclaimers. I'm totally biased. I have you're gonna see that. I'm not gonna try to hide that from you. If you want a therapist that's not gonna be totally biased, that's not me. I've got my feelings, my passionate, perspectives on things, and I'm going to be very kind about not trying to, and sensitive about not trying to force that on you or not trying to manipulate. And then I'll usually pause and say, I might try to manipulate. I'm totally into manipulating. I mean, so if you catch that, if you see that, just call me out and I'll say I'm sorry. And then I'll probably try it again a few sessions later. But,
Carson actually said when we were visiting with him, he said, I'm a pushy therapist.
Yeah.
And I appreciated him saying that that therapists do, especially with experience, they see and recognize what's going on. And that's a value to, in my opinion, whether you choose to follow it or not, but to have someone who can sit in a neutral spot to a certain extent, assess, and then say, yeah, you really ought to consider it.
Yeah.
There's value to that.
I think as a parent, when you try to keep that so balanced with each individual child, different personalities, one, it's very difficult. I think it's pretty impossible for me. Maybe people can manage that. Gosh, when I think that's just with 3 children, right? When you think of families of 6, 7, 8 children, I think, how would you do that? It just seems logistically like an impossibility. But I think it also comes across as less sincere. There's some manufactured aspect of that. And I think there's some value to that, or the simple fact that you're trying to do something positive. But oftentimes it doesn't connect as deeply as just being real and helping your children understand that despite you connect more easily in this area with child number 1 and more easily in this area with child number 2, and not at all with child number 3. No, just kidding. But, there's variations. And some children, you have greater similarities with them, and it's an easier vibe than with others of your children. And for them to learn right off the bat that doesn't mean that they're valued any less or loved any less or appreciated any less is huge. I tend to try to steer in that direction versus trying to keep that balanced and keep that equal.
Yeah. What you just described, John, to a certain extent is that you are coaching your children to someday become parents who understand this deeper level, this emotional maturity about, what it's really like to be a parent. And even though in the moment you are parenting them, you're also saying someday you're going to have multiple children. And some of your kids can watch paint dry and eat cereal off the floor and be totally happy.
Right.
And then you have someone else who you have to entertain all day.
Right.
One of them just is going to take more time.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't mean you don't love the other one. It just means they're fairly functioning on their own. And so that's an interesting thing to bring your child into some of the parenting mindset while they're still a child.
Yeah, I think it also ties into helping them realize at an early age that life isn't fair and not everything's going to be wonderful. Not everything's like the movies, and that's okay. It's okay. It's okay if you don't connect perfectly with everyone, and even people that you really deeply care about, people in your own family. That's part of life, and there's an acceptance component to that I think is very healing and helpful. and not trying to force that kind of connection
Yeah.
in every aspect, in all ways.
What are you seeing come to your office maybe on a regular basis in terms of a teen who may be struggling, with their parents, on any number of topics, and that this battle of wills or agency or choice is going on? Is that fairly common? Parents are saying, hey, this is a challenge.
Oh,
I'm
for
bringing my
sure.
kid to therapy.
Yeah.
And in reality, as you sit with the child in therapy, you're going,
Yeah.
I think this kid's pretty normal. Maybe his parents are pretty strong in terms of trying to control.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I see it a lot. I think maybe at a deeper core level with those very kinds of dynamics, the battle for control. And it's certainly not just with teens, it's with every age of development, every client that I've ever seen. The universal theme is that people are feeling not enough. They're feeling inadequate. They're struggling. They have fears of inadequacy, fears of messing up, fears of not being good enough, whether that's as a 14-year-old or as a 24-year-old or a 50-year-old or as a provider, as a spouse, as a parent, as a sibling, as a son, a daughter, a community member, a church member, whatever it is that they're living in their life. And that's the universal grip that really gets people to react and behave in ways that are not them, are not really who they are, not who they want to be, and creates problems and tension in relationships and in daily life experiences. And that's would be probably the single most common underlying thread I see. Of course, there's organic kinds of things to consider, biological, physiological kind of inclinations here and there, deficits and strengths and variations that complicate things. But it's that lie, that perception, that belief that that they're not good enough. People are ashamed or embarrassed or angry or, because of them or their inadequacies. Yeah.
Loaded question.
Yeah.
But I mean, if everybody comes into your office and because they're feeling some variation of what you're talking about, of just lack of value from somebody else, obviously you can't control this other person. So how do we help these people realize that they have some value, that they are important, regardless of what they're actually feeling? And,
You're setting it up perfectly, really, Preston, because it's the key is that they're not feeling it from themselves, right? I mean, yeah, it's easy to feel it from a spouse or a sibling or a parent or somebody else that's significant, a significant other in their lives, but the core is that they're not feeling it. And we're more reactionary with that concept than we are with any others, with any other people that are feeling upset or frustrated or demonstrating some degree of dissatisfaction with our own behavior. It's getting them to feel at peace with themselves, and not this Hakuna Matata kind of peace, like you don't need to do anything, just sit back, relax, and everything's fine. But just an acceptance, a personal acceptance of the good and the bad, the strengths and the weaknesses, coming to a better relationship with themselves, loving themselves, understanding themselves. That's the key factor for then going forward and creating better experiences in relationships. It's huge what it does to just change up relationships. It takes away a lot of the pressure, a lot of the tension, a lot of the feeling of, I've got to fix you, or somebody's got to fix this, or it's more like, no, it's okay, we're going to get there. Things will work out. What we really need to do is understand ourselves, be patient with ourselves, be loving with ourselves, and boy, that does a lot to help us to behave similarly towards others and extend that same kind of mercy and patience and gratitude and love to everybody else around us.
It's interesting, Preston's comment and question about, how do you get people to feel that? I'm recognizing even in myself that as a father, I think when we tend to think about, people not feeling that they matter, we tend to think through like, well, maybe it's a teen coming in. But in reality, for me, I often find myself projecting some of my own insecurity as a father onto my children. I'm not enough. Therefore, I'm going to control my kids so they are going to be enough.
Yeah,
They
right.
will be enough. They'll be
Right.
bigger than me. They'll be
Right.
better.
Yeah.
I'm going to live my life through my kids' athletics.
Right.
Just the stuff, right, that we kind of think through in our own way that we perceive ourselves and how we live life, and super interesting to see that kind of trickle down effect of what happens when parents feel that way. How does it project it onto their children and, how they feel that way? Preston and I being involved in Brainstoke and meeting with lots of, teens and mountain bike teams. And it's awesome. I mean, because we see in real life, how we parent and how that impacts, children and how teens are impacted by it. And I mean, our objective at Brainstoke is really in the end to help people feel like they matter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the goal of it, is to figure that out. And so when you think about that therapeutic situation, teen coming in or parents coming in, they're concerned about their kids. How do you go from there's a power struggle going on or some mental health challenges going on to they're stoked, they're finding passion and purpose and they have, some stoke in their life of feeling good and that they matter. Take us through the progression of that, finding stoke.
Yeah. Gosh, it's so unique, so individualized with each person in the room. It's a different process. I've often said to young, not always young to the field, new to the field interns, that therapy is an art. There's definitely a lot of science to back up some of our efforts. But there's an art to it in understanding where the client is in their journey and what they need at a certain time. You often hear from therapists that are huge proponents of a certain modality, and sometimes in their marketing efforts and in their enthusiasm, and I think it's well-intentioned, but we'll talk about how this is the way. This is the approach, and these other guys down the street don't know what they're doing. And they're not following, empirically based, evidence based. And so sometimes there's that, we use that as a way to say this is better. And it's like, I think there's some value to good, better, best kinds of ideas of how you approach clients or how you help with a certain symptom or variation of symptoms. But it is so unique, and you've got to be flexible. You've got to meet people where they're at, or you've got to be super selective of the clients that you see. If you're going to push one modality, then you've got to, it's going to fit one type of person. And
sure.
Anyway, but getting them to that point, the thing that kept coming back to my mind was tied to your comments about your own reflection as a father and when we're trying to get our children to be a certain way or really wanting them to be successful and happy, but maybe some of that is some projection. I think that's wise to consider that. I think that's common. It's really helping them to win that personal inner victory. So whether it's the teenager, it's the 5-year-old, it's the 30-year-old, it's the parent or parents, helping them to understand that they really are their worst enemy. And if they're fighting that personal battle and then they're trying to help somebody else who's fighting that battle, that's really hard to do. It's like two people drowning and they're trying to save each other, and that's kind of difficult to do. Yeah. It's the old put your oxygen mask on first, and then you can help, those around you put theirs on. So helping them see that, I have a really cool experience that I often use with clients. It's a very huge eye-opener. It's a very loaded, emotionally loaded kind of experience. It often brings on a lot of tears and a lot of perspective. But I'll talk about some of the worst abuse cases I've ever seen. And I won't get into all of the graphic details, but I'll give enough perspective that people are usually wide-eyed and very somber as they're hearing it. And I'll say some of these, we're not talking like 3 or 4 episodes or incidents, events, we're talking about maybe 200 from the time that they were 6 until the time they were 18, kind of thing. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, horrible stuff. And then I'll switch it up a little bit and I'll talk about sticks and stones and how whoever came up with that, I don't know what they were talking about. There must have been a limited kind of translation going on, because the sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me is really messed up. Like, words do often more damage than sticks and stones do. And sometimes the long-term aspects of that are more difficult. The healing process is slower than resetting a bone and having that heal and moving along. And so I really help them buy into this concept about how damaging that is. Words, negativity, rejection, cruelty. And then I'll talk to them. It's horrible. I'm setting them up on some level, right? And then I'll say, what's the first thing you say to yourself in the morning when you get up and you look in the mirror? Do you know what it is for most people? It's the most horrible things. They usually say that I'm fat or I'm ugly or what the F happened to me. They've got these terrible...
I'm not happy with the reflection, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And as I start to help them see and recognize how many times they assault themselves verbally. Sometimes it's just mentally. It's just a thought. They don't even say it out loud. But before they've even left the house by 9 a.m., we're talking dozens of times. By the end of the day, you're often into the hundreds. And then I times that. I pull out my phone, open the calculator, and times that. Oftentimes it's an adult, right? And times that by 25 years or 30 years. And then I show them the number. And I go back to the horrible abuse case of 100 and something assaults, 100 and some, and I show them the 7,383,000 times that they do that to themselves over the last 20 years or the last 10 years and it is very eye-opening for them to recognize that they really do treat themselves poorly. They really do have bad habits of talking negatively. And so then once I've helped them understand that and see that, then it's game time. I'm hardcore about you. You say something bad about yourself and you're going to hear it like that's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. It's awesome.
That's powerful stuff.
Yeah, really powerful.
That is really powerful stuff. And hearing you describe that, even in how my own morning went this morning, right? But I'm thinking to myself,
you're a perpetrator, Tom.
Here we go. I do wear spandex a lot. And so there's tendencies, right, that are there. Joking aside, but that
was not politically correct, Tom. There's a lot of good people in spandex out there, including yourself. Let's work on that.
I know. I'm going to blame my teen kids for the look on their face when I walk in after a ride. It's not awesome. But does that set up this exacerbation of what's going on with social media and phones with teens?
100%.
Right? I mean, without that, we were doing the 7 million a year thing of like negative self-talk without the comparison
it with
social. So
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Very
Do you have
tied together.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, just stop doing it. I mean, I'm not a huge one to say don't get on social media or avoid. It's just a reality of life, but become aware and become, I call it catch and correct. You start catching that in yourself and correcting that every time it happens. One of the biggest challenges with it is it's that concept of by the ease of the way many perish concept.
Yeah.
It's the idea that it is such a small and simple thing. It's so simply set up to recognize. Everybody knows when they're beating themselves down. And yet it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of effort to stop those bad habits. I mean, you have to pay attention to it. I usually tell my clients, get a team. You need a posse. You need to round up a posse. You need other people who's around you a lot. Teach them this same concept and then ask them. Ask them to catch you. Ask them to call you out. Set up like a swearing jar, right? Where every time you criticize, you got to put $1 in the jar, whatever. Set up. People get really good at helping catch you with that. But it's a process. It takes time. Sometimes clients will come back the next session and they're like, I'm still not feeling a whole lot of, and it's like, I pull out the calculator again, right? Right, you've caught yourself 48 times since last time, but you've done it 7 million times. It's going to take a little bit before you start reaping the benefits of that long term and feeling differently about yourself. It's huge. It changes everything for them to become more aware. And once they're aware of themselves doing that, they become super powerful advocates for everybody else around them. They start standing up and saying, hey, Dad, I saw that look in the mirror with your spandex. Don't do that. That's not cool. Dad, did you not know that nobody was meant to look good in spandex? This isn't a fashion statement.
Yeah.
This is pure utilitarian. Pure utilitarian.
That's right. It isn't about looks. It's just speed.
Right.
It's speed.
Speed and comfort.
Are you condoning full white spandex kits?
Absolutely.
Oh, dear.
Absolutely.
Here we go. Here we go.
We better ask
I
your
think
brother
my
Matt.
number just went to 11 million. No, that's the principle behind what you're describing is brilliant. It's possible that parents hear that and this goes on repeat over and over and over, and they end up teaching all their kids, this concept. And in our house, we hear Liza, she spoke to a group of, young ladies this last weekend. And when I hear her describe, if you're going to compare, not stop, if you're going to compare fairly. And what you're describing is a comparison of self. At least be fair about it, right?
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, Tom. I am a huge believer. In fact, I push it to the point of saying, do compare. I feel like when we tell people, and it's kind of trendy, and it's been, once Oprah says it, or Dr. Phil, or it's hard to compete, and that's not meant to be a criticism of them. They're doing, I think everybody does their best and does a wonderful job in trying to help. But the stop comparing yourselves and all the cool little cliches about how comparison's the thief of joy and all that. I think there's good intentions and good aspects of that, but it is so hard not to compare. I think on some level we were meant to compare. Your eyes look outward, not inward. And you do use that as an evaluation tool. And to tell them to stop doing that, it's like a double whammy then, because then people are trying to they recognize they're doing it and they're like, oh, dang it, I'm doing it. What's wrong with me? On top of, I'm not near as good as that kid at basketball or whatever it is that they're doing. And it's like, I tell them, no, go ahead and compare, but do it accurately.
Right. Can I take that a step further?
Yeah, please.
So we live in a state where faith and religion is prominent.
Yeah.
Right. And this idea of comparison and, I'm going to throw another word in here, perfectionism. And when you start comparing and perfectionism, and a lot of that recipe becomes an interesting culture, especially children who are already comparing maybe negative self-talk, right? They're in the millions of like, I suck at life and whatever. What's interesting is that I oftentimes will attend my religious organization, and there will be a topic literally in the same conversation where it's like, social media is the worst. Stop comparing, get off it. It's not good for you. And then the conversation shifts to comparing your own spirituality and your own worthiness, right? And so it's this interesting, two sides coin type of a thing where stop comparing this way, but compare yourself spiritually. Are you doing these things, in terms of your worthiness? And so, and I'm not trying to stir the religious pot here. I just know in organizationally within Aspire, we hear almost weekly about children who are taking their lives. Lots of different topics, lots of different issues, but it seems that for many of them, perfectionism in the right or wrong hands, I should say, tendencies of a child can become very weighty. And oftentimes you hear the story, most popular kid in school, killing it on the basketball team. No one really knew what was going on. And then, took their own life. So I know that's heavy. I just threw a lot on you that way, but it seems like that the recipe of comparing and perfectionism is part of, right, kids not being able to cope with the stressors of all of those messages. So can you address that? Talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I feel like you've done a great job addressing it right here, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's such an important topic, and I don't want to take away from the sensitivity to adolescents, children, in essence, that are struggling with that. But interestingly, to speak to the power, the danger, the damage of that recipe that you're putting out there. There's another group of people, they're the men in their 60s that kill themselves more often than the adolescents. And it's because they have the same thinking going on. And now they're at a point where they think they should have made it by now. They should, in essence, be perfect. They should have it made. They shouldn't be working so hard. They should be retired. They should have saved all this money. They should have all these things. And they're hitting that midlife crisis kind of concept and saying, I've blown it. And it's too late. I can't turn around and redo everything now. I mean, it's too late. And they end their lives more often than the youngsters do. It's a sad scenario. So it affects everyone. It affects everyone big time. And as you said it, I liked the combination of words, and I was glad that you brought it up, the striving for unrealistic expectations and the unhealthy, inaccurate, global kinds of comparing is a recipe for horrible culture. In fact, as you were saying it, I thought, gosh, that's like more of a recipe for a cult. Like that brings on cult kinds of behaviors and tendencies more so than a healthy culture. And it's huge and it needs to stop. And so I'm grateful that you're brave enough to unintentionally stir that pot.
Yeah.
We all need to hear it. There's no single religious organization out there or any organization of any kind. There's no single individual that doesn't need to hear this and understand that. That is huge. We've got to lighten up. That one of the most common, it's kind of like the feelings of inadequacy. It's a cousin to that. It's very common, is this perception that I see in clients and everybody that I meet with, this idea that they're just not doing enough. And people are doing far better than they give themselves credit for. They just inaccurately and unfairly evaluate themselves and find themselves lacking. And just to say, lighten up. Hey, you're doing way better than you realize. I love sharing, and I guess it's not helpful for this context because people can't see this, but I love drawing on the whiteboard or on a piece of paper. I'll put a circle at one corner, like the bottom left corner. I'll try to describe it and hopefully it makes sense. Bottom left corner of the piece of paper, the dry erase board, and I'll put another circle at the top right corner. So diagonally from each other. And I'll put some symbol in that bottom circle. Sometimes with more religiously focused kind of folks, I'll say earth and heaven. Heaven, that's their goal. They want to get to heaven. Or I will say you're here at this point and this is where you want to go. Maybe it's the becoming a better basketball player, whatever it is, a better spouse, a better child, better at some sport or some academic issue. And I'll say nobody goes from this lower circle to that higher circle in a straight line. Nobody does that. There are lots of zigzags, ups and downs, and I'll draw that red. I'm moving all over the board and going ultimately to that objective, reaching it, right? I'm showing them this, but then I help them by looking at that paper or the dry erase board and saying, when you were up at this peak, you were feeling awesome. You had made so much progress, especially looking back to where you came from, this mountain you climbed. But then when you descended there, you felt horrible. You thought you were a piece of crap. You thought you'd failed. You're back to ground zero. And there's never going back to ground zero unless you just believe that and accept the lie. Because we always have new experience, gained understanding, gained strength, gained wisdom. Unless you tell yourself, nope, I've lost it all. I'm starting completely from scratch. I'm a failure. And you can create that kind of sense and thought process in your own head when it's like, oh, you still have. Yes, you might, if you were climbing Mount Everest, you might be back at base camp at the starting elevation, but you have now new experience that you never had before. You're not starting over. You're starting back at this point, but there's so much more that you have. But to help them see the variations and to be more patient and kind and to back up and see the bigger picture of you. It's interesting, you can highlight each of those dips, but if you draw a line connecting all of the dips, right, they're still going.
Trending up.
Yeah, they're trending up. They're doing far better than they thought they were. And it's super helpful. It helps them pull it into perspective and see themselves differently.
I feel like our conversation there's a theme, or one of the themes that I'm seeing or hearing is the thoughts you have and the words you say, and how they impact yourself and how they impact others.
Matter.
Yeah, totally right. And it seems, are there words we just shouldn't think or say? And maybe we inadvertently compare ourselves with whether it's in a church setting or any other social setting. We say something and maybe it's just the wrong descriptor. But I'm just curious, are there certain words you don't like to hear your clients say, like with regards to value and mattering?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are these personal words that they've adopted over the years, critical, negative ones, labeling ones, especially just mean ones. Like again, saying I'm fat or I'm ugly. Gosh, I've got a client and the word he's used over the years is slob. And how self-degrading it is. It's one thing to talk about, I would like to be healthier. I'd like to lose some weight. I'd like my joints not to hurt so much. It's not pretending that you're healthy at 300 pounds or whatever. It's like, you can be real about how much you weigh or something that you don't like about yourself, but learn to be kind, learn to be hopeful, learn to see the good despite the bad, learn to be respectful to yourself. But yeah, there are certain, nothing's coming right to mind other than, again, those like idiot and stupid. And I'm a big one to catch people when they say I can't, or a big one is I don't know. That is such a reflex. Like people say that all the time. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, it's like nuclear physics? Because I really don't know how that works. I could not draw you a diagram of the molecular kind of process that's taking place. I don't have that info. And that's okay. It's like, you don't have to pretend that you know Mandarin if you don't know Mandarin. But how often people actually say it in an accurate way like that is 1 in 100. The 99 is just an automatic, I don't know. And I'm like, you haven't even given it 5 seconds. Like, whoa, slow down, think about that. What do you mean you don't know? What are you really saying by that? And almost always they can correct that and say, wait a minute. Yeah, that's not true. It's just this self-defeating kind of habit that I've gotten into, and breaking that habit is huge. Yeah, how you think about yourself, how you talk to yourself, huge.
On this topic, Liza introduced me to some words a couple years ago that I didn't really think too much about. And as time has gone on, I hear them more and more. And oftentimes, being the spouse of a therapist, I hear very little detail, any specifics, because of the confidentiality that you have with clients. But the words that she was using were self-loathing. And I wanted to talk about this today in this type of a setting because if I'm totally honest right now, as a man, as a father, it is really uncool and unpopular right now to be a man and say much about being a man. I mean, I love the fact that culturally we're getting closer and closer to equality in the workplace. All of the things that should, in my opinion, be happening between women and our culture. Rightfully so, all of it. But there is a feeling that I have right now, as a man, where it's an interesting dynamic to be in, and to have strong opinions about certain things often comes off as you're a chauvinist or you're arrogant or ego. And so when I combine some of that cultural and public sentiment in the media about men being pigs or all the stuff, right, that some of the history would say, yeah, that was wrong. It was wrong the way that history got it. Not even a but. Just now, I find myself kind of trying to find the footing of how do I support women in all of the ways that we should, and yet how do I still continue to be a strong man and to advocate for self and to do, to have the same kind of, I guess, rights, so to speak. I don't know if that's the right word, but I guess what I'm trying to say is regarding men's issues, can you speak to that just a little bit and how you may see it clinically of the weight that some men may feel in trying to, to support them so that they feel like they matter?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. You had
How messy was that lead in?
No, it was great. It's a difficult, nuanced kind of balancing act, I think, on some level. It feels that way anyway. You feel like you're being scrutinized and watched by this group over here and also this other group, and you're just trying your best. And I think to some extent it's just a matter of, again, lightening up a little and saying, hey, we're all just trying our best. And again, the older people get, the more they tend to realize that.
Yeah.
It's kind of two things. The older they get, there's that common, the older I get, the more I realize I don't know a damn thing. And and also that idea of, hey, people are doing their best.
Yeah.
Everybody's just doing their best, cut them some slack. But I do think it's important. There are some nuances there that have been generational kinds of challenges. And I thought about this because one of the questions you had asked, what was it? It was something about what would you say to the moms of the world, women. And I thought, well, to this point, I would start by saying, I'm not going to say anything. Like, you're doing an amazing job. I think you're doing an amazing job. I don't have the authority in the first place to be evaluating that. And some people would say, well, you're trained in this area, and certainly you have some education and some experience, but there's a respect and an honor of, hey, I don't know anything more than what you know. You're an expert in your own right, in your own life, in your own experience. But then at the same time, does that mean you just keep your mouth shut and you don't engage? And I think it's all about sensitivity. It's like you can say, would you like my opinion? Or it might be, I have something I want to say, but I don't want to put that on you. It's really interesting. It's like in the past, there's been, whether we're talking about women or we're talking about blacks or we're talking about whatever minority group, the LGBTQA plus population, whatever it is, right? It's like we've realized that we needed to stop, and who are we, but realizing we're gaining greater sensitivity, that when we said, oh, let me help you because you're inferior, let me correct you, let me tell you how you should be living your life or what's right and what's wrong. And with that transformation or with that change, it's almost like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And we're now seeing their pain and their suffering. And we come right back and say, let me help you. And it's like, damn, where do you go with that? Like, because are you perpetuating that same concept? And so there's a difference between let me help you and do you want my help?
Yeah.
Is there something I could do to help? I want you to know that I want to help. I don't know if I can help, but I feel it. I have a desire to do it. And maybe I even have a strong feeling about something that I'd like to share, but I'm seeking that permission. I'm being sensitive. I'm not just putting it out there or proclaiming myself to be the answer or to have the knowledge or the experience. And there's just a sensitivity factor.
Yeah.
I think there's a checking in with them and asking, and where are you at? And do you even want that? Again, it's like a teenager being brought into therapy against their will. Gosh, we've even seen scenarios over the years where the parents said, I'm taking you out for a shake and fries, and they show up at the therapy office.
Surprise,
right?
there's a couch lay down.
And it's like, oh, really? I didn't want to be part of this. I'm sorry. You got suckered, didn't you? But to be like, hey, is there something you do want from me? Because this is going to be a hard process if not.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not going to pretend that I know better than you and I'm going to teach you or I'm going to show you. But if you want to know something, I do have some feelings about this.
Would you describe that
deference.
as permission? You're asking their consent, getting permission from them to engage.
Absolutely, technically, and there's a strategy with that that's helpful, but it's also just a display of respect.
Yeah.
Just respect for another human being. Doesn't matter what their sex is, doesn't matter what their gender is, doesn't matter what their orientation is, doesn't matter what their color is, what their anything. They're just another person, and checking in with them and treating them with respect. That's huge. I think that's one of the keys.
That's great advice, I think, for a lot of men. I mean, think of how I fumbled even how to introduce it, right? Just men not even necessarily knowing how to address the whole equality thing because they're so nervous to say the wrong thing. And clearly, I probably said the wrong things already, just is a lead in, you know? So for those listening, just know, like, this is one of those things. And I love the idea of checking in and consent and asking, you know, how that feels. And, you know, recently I had a conversation with the Aspire Medical executive team. Is 3 of the members of it are women. And the topic was, what do you want to say on social media about Father's Day? And I didn't know what they would say. Well, one of the women, Stacey Davies, came back and she said that you are loved, respected, and that you need to just rest. You're tired. And I think that I'm not giving permission or granting permission. Maybe some women who are listening in are going to be like, well, you spent 10 hours watching golf yesterday on the couch. Like, yeah, how tired are you? But I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying that I believe that a lot of men right now they're exhausted and they don't know that they matter in the ways that, you know, they may be looking to matter. And so, you know, if it makes sense, I know you were describing to me how to get permission and consent to maybe speak with women about this topic. But I think that the flip side is also true, that if women went to their husband and said very similarly, you know, out of respect or whatever, how can I communicate with you so that you do feel valued and respected and that you matter?
It's hard
I don't
for
know.
a fight to start with that kind of approach. It's pretty powerful.
I don't know. Is that a lead-in fight? I don't know from a therapist perspective, but there's something there going on right now, and maybe rightfully so. Maybe that's what it's going to take, you know, years of men kind of feeling that humility that maybe women felt forever since the beginning of time. Just no one was checking in with how they felt and that they mattered, and maybe that's okay. The pendulum has swung back. I just am feeling that, as a man and with a lot of my friends that I spend time with, that they're they're good. They're generally good. They didn't know they got it wrong for millennia. They're just waking up too, saying, "Yeah, now that we know better, let's do better. Let's figure this out." But not necessarily knowing how to move forward with it.
Yeah, I think the verbiage that you're using is spot on. I mean, obviously, if the tone, you talk about the music and the message, and if the music isn't matching, if it's like, how the hell can I help you understand, you idiot? Yeah, well, right, that doesn't go over well.
Right.
But when there's a genuine, sincere slowing down and looking the person in the eyes and saying, how can I help you? How can I help you understand what it is that I'm feeling or what I need, or how can you help me understand? I mean, the sincerity behind that and the words that are not assuming, that are respectful, it rarely is that met with contention or defensiveness, or it rarely turns into a fight.
Yeah.
That's powerful. I mean, that's exactly where it's at. And when sometimes you've taught that language, you've helped somebody see how to do that, and they come back and say, hey, I tried that, but it didn't work. Well, you find out that the music wasn't matching, right? They were standing over him and doing this and, whatever. Anyway, no, it's powerful. It's really good stuff.
One of the things that was intriguing to me about getting to know some of the Aspire family was, at the very core of the DNA is the people, not just internally, but externally, the clients. And the mantra of Aspire is an unwavering belief in people. So, even as you describe the trauma and all of the heavy challenges of society, Aspire's at the crossroads of some really heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Consistently. How do you maintain that positive attitude of an unwavering belief in people?
Yeah, it's not easy for sure, but I think practicing what I preach is huge, to make those same efforts with myself, to learn to love myself, to be kind to myself, to be gentle with myself. Again, sometimes I think people hear that as a eat, drink, and be merry attitude, or no responsibility. It's like, not at all. That's not an excuse to not hold myself accountable for my mistakes. But to be kind in that process, to stop flogging myself and stop berating, and that does a lot for your mood. It does a lot for your attitude. And to share that, to feel that peace and joy that you feel in experiencing that self-love and that self-acceptance, it's contagious. You want to share it with others. You want to help them see that and experience that. And to see that glimpse of hope in their eyes, to see a smile come across their face, or to see the tears that come from their own recognition of how bad they've treated themselves, and that it's time to stop that, and that they're worthy of love, they're worthy of self-acceptance, they're worthy of self-respect. That makes it all worth it. And I don't know that it's getting rid of the heaviness of that. It's learning how to manage that, learning how to deal with that. I definitely think on some level, it makes us stronger in our emotional resiliency, capacity to love and to care. But there's weight with it for sure. Yeah. And maybe it's just the conclusion that it's worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get old and die with a lot of pain, but you've made a difference, then so be it,
I think it's amazing that that's your response, because it is a stressful, career, and there's a lot of maybe weight's the wrong the word for it, but people have an expectation when they come that they're going to learn coping strategies and how to address some of the challenges that they're having. And Brain Stokes 5 S's, actually, for our listeners, so that I learned of the 5S's from Liza, but Liza said John is the godfather of the 5S's. She's like, John
I
Howard
just saw myself
created.
with a machine gun or something. Nice.
Oh, that's right. The original author. But no, when you think of coping, whether it's therapy or parenting or whatever, the 5S's really are coping, right? They're coping mechanisms that create serotonin, in the brain. And, we often talk about, the sleep, the sun, the sweat, those things. How do you cope? What is your go-to?
Well, before I get to that, I was going to say beyond a coping mechanism or skills, there are also ways of training yourself that you matter, that you're valuable, that you deserve to feel good, that you deserve some time, you deserve some attention, you deserve to get the rest or the sun or the whatever it is, right? The bike ride and the music. For you, it's the sun and the bike ride and the music. That's like puts you in heaven. And it's training yourself to say, I do matter. I do matter, and it's okay to love myself. So I think beyond that, it's a great strategy for dealing with a stressful time of life or issues. It's a great way to live life. I like a lot of those same kinds of things. Love that. Maybe it ties into your question, Preston, that I think I'm excited, genuinely excited for the next time. Instead of thinking about all the heavy stuff that just got dumped, and I'm excited it's like the more bad I hear, or the more suffering I hear, the more excited I am to try to make a difference. And it's that focus on the positive.
To hear their progress.
Yeah. I think that might be part of it, but also the self-care is huge.
Yeah.
Having things in your life. I love going to the gym. It's been fun since Tom went down to St. George. I lost my lifting partner, and now it's Maddie, and that's been so much fun.
It's cool
to go to the gym and have that experience, the serotonin and the dopamine and all that comes with that, and it's awesome. But having your things that you love and that connect you and ground you, and
sure,
freestyle,
any topic, anything you want to beatbox, you want to do a small little rap here for a minute.
Kind of. Yeah.
However you want to wrap this.
I'm pretty sure you started singing before we went live.
I know, but that was Kenny Rogers. I was like thinking when Tom said rap, I was like, oh yeah, there's one from junior high, Fly Girl. I've got that one memorized. It's really fun. Although I don't know what that would do to the listening crowd out there. That might really tank stuff, but
yeah. How about this? How about if you were to given $1,000? Because our listeners may not know this, but John is a very snazzy dresser. So someone gives you $1,000 and you need to go spend it on John's attire. Where are you going?
I don't.
Are you going to Lulu? Are you going to Copper Rivet?
No, not Copper. That was behind.
He listens to KGQ.
I did go to Copper Rivet in the 80s at the Newgate Mall. Newgate Mall.
Newgate had a Copper
Rivet. The shop
Rivet.
was behind the Newgate Mall there.
Was.
So
Nice.
I went to Copper Rivet many times. Bought some OP shirts, t-shirts, and shorts at Copper Rivet.
Some white 501s.
Right. Yep. Yep. Had a little bit of a Don Johnson,
That was Chess King,
Miami
right
Vice.
across from Copper Rivet.
I don't know. I never really went into Chess King. Lulu's is a popular one. Rory's a popular one.
Nice.
Occasionally I'll go into Buckle, and then I'll get in there and I'll be like, I don't know. What is it? What is it about this? Is it the skulls on the T-shirts? I don't know. But then I could also go to Smith and Edwards though and find a good shirt.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a good combo.
Yeah.
Nice blend. What else we got? Anything? Preston?
I'm still stuck at Copper Rivet.
Copper Rivet.
Tell me you were in Copper Rivet.
Of course.
Yeah. It was awesome.
How funny.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great.
Great to be here
Thank
with
you.
you.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, you've had
Appreciate
your
it.
dose.
Thanks.